The Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit beckons for the Intelligent Money British GT Championship. The penultimate round of the 2022 campaign will take place tomorrow. It is the penultimate qualifying session of the season, though, that is coming up in just a few minutes' time. The cars and drivers about to head onto the circuit for their 4 qualifying sessions, which will set the grid for the 2-hour race tomorrow. It's a nice sunny afternoon here, actually. We may be officially into autumn, but it still feels very summery here in the southeast, with ambient temperatures, I would say, just into the 20s, and track temperatures perhaps at a similar rate. They would have been higher, but we had a bit of a sprinkle of rain half an hour or so ago, maybe just dropped the track temps slightly. And the talk among the teams is that there could be more rain on the way. There are some ominous looking dark clouds in the distance. They are, some of them at least, heading our way, and that could certainly throw a bit of a spanner in the works as far as the qualifying session is concerned here this afternoon. An important qualifying session as well, because being the penultimate round of the championship, we've got championship situations across all of our classes pretty much to look out for, and indeed the main championship, if you like, the overall GT3 Drivers' Championship, could be wrapped up tomorrow, but more on that later. We do have Ram Racing confirmed, though, as our GT3 Teams champions. They achieved this at Spa last time out, and Ian Loggy, driver of the number 6 car for Ram Racing, is the man who could become champion here this weekend. He catches up now with Bryn Lucas.
Well, it's all about you, isn't it, this weekend? You've got a huge advantage in the championship, but you don't want to throw it away ahead of the decider next time.
Yeah, we've got a bit of an advantage, but there's still a big job to be done, so we've got to go out there, be as cool as possible, don't make any mistakes, just keep doing a good job, and hopefully the championship can come to us, but we're not going to be heroes.
You're preparing to be in the car with Jules Gounon, but we know he's not going to be able to make it out. So you've got Callum Mcleod, somebody I know that you're very familiar with. What's his words of wisdom going into this one? Because the pressure's on him, really, isn't it?
Yeah, we both agreed we're both out there to do the best job we can and just make sure we get as many points as we can. It'd be great to seal it this weekend, but if that doesn't happen, then we'll take it to Donington, and it'll be all to play for. So it's ours to lose, but we've got to focus on making sure that doesn't happen.
Well, you're being shouted at now, so get in the car. Good luck.
Cheers, guys.
Excellent stuff. Yes, Ian Loggy then, a man with a lot of pressure on his shoulders. He has got this commanding lead in the championship, but there is always the chance that things can go wrong. I actually had a conversation with Ian a little bit earlier on this afternoon, and he was saying exactly that. His main goal this weekend is simply to avoid trouble, to finish the race. If he can do enough to seal the championship, then that's fantastic. But if he can't, then it is far more important that he finishes, he bags some points, because he knows that as long as he finishes somewhere in the top half dozen or so, he'll still have a very healthy championship advantage going to Donington next time out. But 2 hours of racing tomorrow around one of the most challenging circuits in the country, certainly not his championship just yet. Ian being shouted into the car because he will be the first into the car in this session. If you're new to British GT, or if it's your first time watching one of our qualifying sessions, then the way it works is the session split into 4 10-minute sessions. Of course, each car shared by 2 drivers, a Pro and an AM within GT3. The AMs go out first in GT3. They have 10 minutes to set a lap time. Then the Pros have another 10 minutes to set a lap time. You combine the fastest times from each driver to give you a combined time, and that is what sets the grid. So one of your drivers might be very fast. If the other driver can't quite match them, then you won't find yourself on pole position. And pole position is definitely a place you want to be here at Brands Hatch. It's notoriously difficult to overtake around here, especially in these high-powered and, more to the point, high downforce GT3 cars. So any bit of track position advantage you can get for the start of the race is going to pay dividends. Fast lane open then. They are starting the session any moment now. There's a bit of a queue forming out at the pit lane exit, and the rumble from beneath me tells me that more and more cars are arriving down at the end of the pit lane then. But Ian Loggy with a job to do now, as we've said, sharing the car this weekend, not with Jules Gounon, but with Callum Mcleod, with whom he's raced on a few occasions this season. Jules was never doing a full season, but an unfortunate back injury a week ago over in Germany means that he's having to sit out for a couple of weeks. Ian, though, is confident that Jules will be back with him for the Donington decider. So, green flag flies then, GT3 qualifying session 1 underway. The AM drivers making their way onto the circuit, led by Alex Maliakin in the Red Line Racing Lamborghini. Now, Alex Maliakin partners this car with James Dornan. They sit 4th in the points, arriving here at Brands Hatch. Now, once all was said and done after Spa, and a bit of an appeal that was heard after Spa as well, Ian Logie, as we've said, has this, 39-point championship lead, but he's very, very close behind. Second place in the championship, James Cottingham and Lewis Williamson are only half a point ahead of Adam Ballon and Sandy Mitchell's Barwell Lamborghini, and they're one and a half ahead of the red line car that we ride on board with now. So if Logie does have a stumble this weekend, then this car could certainly be in with a chance of the championship heading to the final round at Donington Park. You kind of sense really that Malikin and Dorlin are a bit overdue a win. They've had a number of podiums and top fives over the course of the season, including a really strong second place finish in the third race of the year, but they've yet to stand on the top step of the podium. Could maybe this weekend be their chance. There goes the number 4 Mercedes then, so that's the one in the hands of James Cottingham, second in the points coming into this weekend. James Cottingham, in his first full season of modern GT3 racing, he's a very, very well-established historic racer, made his debut actually in the championship here at the start of last year in a Mercedes and was immediately on the pace, and he will be hoping to replicate that again here today in the number 4 2Cs Motorsports car. Mercedes, of course, the same car as, or same kind of car as the one that Ian Logie is driving at the front of the championship. Speaking of the devil, there is Ian turning his way through Paddock Hill Bend, then the pink Mercedes Ram Racing heads out of Paddock. Let's ride on board with him for a bit then, right over the curb on the exit of Paddock, braking just before that bridge into Druids, where he drifts a little bit wide of the apex, hooks up the second apex though, and you can just hear the rumble of the engine as it drags him downhill into the left-hander at Graham Hill Bend. Plenty of curb on the inside. Too much on the exit though, because we're monitoring track limits there, and it's a very, very easy place to run wide. Quite an early turn in there to Surtees corner, but that's a really important corner because it sets you up for the run all the way over Pilgrim's Drop and down the other side into Hawthorne then. Fastest point on the circuit. The car's in speed well over 130 miles an hour as they drop down into the right-hander. And through Hawthorne corner he will go. Of course, he is not the first driver on a flying lap. We know that's Alex Malikin, but I wouldn't expect this to be the fastest lap of the session because it will take them a couple of laps to get the temperature into the Pirelli tyres. And Malikin indeed decides to bail on that lap because he'd actually caught some traffic, some cars that were later out of the pit lane than he was and hadn't yet got fully up to speed. So now he drops back into clean air, and Malikin will give this a proper go on this, his official second flying lap of the session. So a time that he sets of a 27.3 is beaten immediately by Richard Neary, who is in the Team ABBA Racing Mercedes. Spoke to Richard and his son Sam, who he shares the car with earlier on, and they were both saying basically they've got no pressure, nothing to lose this weekend. They just want to try and win the race if they can and get on the podium. And that is certainly something that's achievable. I think they've gone well here at Brands in the past. It does seem to be a circuit that suits the Mercedes AMG pretty well. Let's see how well it suits this one though. James Cottingham on his first attempt at a flying lap has gone purple in the first sector, which means he was faster than anybody else, although was immediately beaten actually by Adam Ballon, who's not that far behind him on track. Another purple middle sector, and this one is quicker than Ballon, so this could be a new fastest time of the session then for James Cottingham as he rounds clearways and out towards Clark Curve for the first time in real anger in this qualifying session. What sort of time is it going to be? 1:24s have been quick times in practice, and a 24.9 is a quick time. Can Adam Ballon beat it in the Lamborghini? The answer is no. He is just over half a second adrift actually, so Cottingham fastest then, Ballon second, Richard Neary third, Nick Halstead for Fox Motorsport is in fourth position. Of course, Nick Halstead was a winner last time out at Spa alongside Jamie Stanley. McLaren really finding some form in the second half of the season. He's beaten by another McLaren though, of Mia Fluid, who briefly goes fourth and is then beaten by Alex Malikin. So the red line Lamborghini on his first proper effort manages to jump into third position. But remember, this is only half the story. It's the combined times between this and the next session that will count. And so this is only half the job done for the teams. Here comes the Paddock Motorsport McLaren. Kelvin Fletcher back with us again this weekend, and he is going to come across the line then seventh fastest. It's another McLaren though that's just jumped into second place. Morgan Tilbrook in the Enduro Motorsport McLaren, going quicker than Adam Ballon then. So it's now Cottingham from Tilbrook, Mercedes from McLaren, from Lamborghini of Adam Ballon in third. Fletcher wide at Druid, so this lap now is not going to be an improvement. He's better off, I think, giving the tyres a lap to rest and then going for it again. Adam Ballon though is not resting at all. He's gone faster than anybody in sector Sector 1. It's a personal best in Sector 2. Needs to find 5.5 tenths or so, though, to get the fastest time away from James Cottingham. Turns into the final corner at Clearways. Crucial that you get the good exit there. The Lamborghini Huracan GT3 powers towards the line. And is this going to be a new fastest lap of the session? A 1:24.924 to beat. And Adam Ballon can't quite do it. He's a 1/10.5 off, but he does get back ahead of Morgan Tilbrook now to go into second place in the session. So Cottingham from Ballon, from Tilbrook, from Loggy at the moment, the top four. Ian Loggy doing a good job in fourth place, doing everything that he needs to do, really. Impressive time there, set by the Century Motorsport BMW of Henry Dawes, his first appearance in British GT, sharing that car with factory BMW driver Alexander Sims this weekend as the 5th and 6th different drivers that have driven that Century Beamer this season. And Henry Dawes not showing himself up at all, going 8th fastest. Morgan Tilbrook, though, wants to get himself back into second place. He's done 2 personal best sectors. He's just been demoted to a 4th, though, because Ian Loggy goes second, and Tilbrook in the end doesn't improve upon 4th. It is exceptionally tight, though. 76 thousandths all that separate Cottingham from Loggy at the front, then less than a 10th back to Ballon, who is less than a 10th ahead of Tilbrook. The top 4 covered by a fraction under a quarter of a second. We expected it to be a tight qualifying session, and it is proving to be so. But I'll tell you what, I am massively impressed with the performance by Ian Loggy, who said that he didn't really want to be taking too many risks this weekend, but in qualifying, I suppose, on low fuel, new tyres, if you're feeling good in the car, then you may as well give it a good go. And the further up the grid this car starts, the less chance there is that it will get caught up in some of those early race dramas that we do sometimes see around here at Brands Hatch. James Cottingham comes through and sets a new fastest time, though, and absolutely wipes the floor with everybody else. So 1:24.58 is now 4 tenths quicker than Ian Loggy, who's not improving on this lap. He's slightly off the pace in Sector 1. That is a really good time for Cottingham. Loggy actually backing off. He's going to give this another go on his next lap, I believe. So either that or he's bailing for the pit lane, which is an option, but with 2.5 minutes to go, he's got time to bank another lap in. Alex Maliakin goes back to 3rd now. The red line Lamborghini refusing to go away in the fight for pole position. Goes ahead of Adam Ballon and Morgan Tilbrook now, with Richard Neary rounding out the top 6, then Calvin Fletcher. Andrew Howard, 8th fastest now in a Mercedes for the first time ever. The driver who we're much more accustomed to seeing in an Aston Martin is driving the Sky Tempesta Racing Mercedes this weekend. He's gone 8th ahead of Henry Dawes and Mia Flirt. Bit of a moment there for Morgan Tilbrook, who's just gone back to second place, so he was really pushing across the line. Carried a bit too much speed into paddock, but he's got the Enduro car back into second. And the 77 car, which had it not been for a couple of bits of bad luck early in the season, could well have been a championship contender this year. They dominated at Donington Park in the middle of the season. Of course, that's the venue of our final round in a few weeks' time. And we are right on board now with Morgan, actually, who I don't think is on a push lap anymore. No, he's obviously bailed on this one after the moment at paddock, but a good effort then from Morgan, who jumps into second place, and he will hand the car over at the end of the session to Marcus Clutton. And we'll see exactly what Marcus is capable of doing in his 10-minute session. Great view, though, here. I mean, bear in mind, this is not a particularly fast lap. This is an in-lap, more than likely, for Morgan. It still looks plenty fast enough for me as he goes through the blind right-handers at Westfield. And then Sheen, and in the barriers, I'm afraid, is the number 24 car. Now, this is the new car, Andre Borodin, the second of the Greystone GT McLarens this weekend, and that will bring about the red flags. That was on the exit of Graham Hill Bend. There is a lot of carbon fibre across the track and indeed across the grass area, so he's got into the barriers pretty hard, and Andre Borodin, unfortunately, brings about an early conclusion to the session. Look at the state of the track down there. The bodywork's been flung right back across the road. There goes Henry Dawes in the Century BMW, picking his way through it. And there is the best news, though. Andre a bit shaken and a bit sore, I'm sure, but he is out of the car. That's the main news. So Andre Borodin will perhaps be taken for a checkup at the medical centre, but he seems to be absolutely fine. And as he trudges away, it looks then as though it's going to be James Cottingham on pole, but here we see Henry Dawes in the number 91 car. I mentioned Alexander Sims is partnering him this weekend, and I think Bryn can catch up with him.
Well, Alex, we've been talking about the BMW that you're about to step into when we get going again, and I know you've had limited time inside the car, but yourself and Henry, this is the 6th drivers, the 5th and 6th drivers we've had this season in the car, so you've had limited time. Tell us a bit about, you know, how prepped you are for today and tomorrow.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I've done 6 or 7 laps in practice. And yeah, first time here for 5 years, I think. So yeah, a little bit up against it, to be honest, but enjoying it. It's awesome to drive here at Brands Hatch. It's great to be back in British GT. You know, it's a super competitive championship, but yeah, we're going to do our best and see how it goes.
I know you raced the car back in Nürburgring earlier on this season, so you've had some time in it. What have you been able to pass on to Henry in the short time you've had with him out here today as the car comes back in alongside us?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is his first time driving it as well, so it's really just a learning process, trying to get him comfortable with the car, which honestly the lap time he's just done in qualifying is superb. So yeah, he's got to grips with it really quickly, so fair play to what he's done.
What sets this car aside from the others that we see out on the grid? We've got the ABBA car coming past, the AMG Merc GT3 coming past us now. What makes this different? Of course, we know setup is different, but what makes this a different car to drive than others that you've seen out here on the grid?
Well, I mean, that's the beauty of GT racing, right? Is we end up with the same sort of lap time performance, but in very different ways and different car configurations. But with the BMW being front-engined, it's generally got very good stability going into the corner. And yeah, decent downforce on the car, I'd say. So it's a limited amount I've driven it on this Pirelli tyre, and I'm learning as I go. But yeah, it's stability on corner entry and high speed is probably its strength.
We've certainly seen the front engine cars do okay with the tyres as well, because the tyres, you know, need the heat in the front end, and some of the mid-engine cars have been struggling a bit.
Maybe. I mean, honestly, I'm so inexperienced with this Pirelli tyre. I don't know the small details that end up making the difference. I'm learning as we go, but yeah, that makes sense.
And you've got to get your head into this. The restart will be happening. I don't know when it's going to be. Hopefully soon, but we're going to get going again fairly soon. You've got to get your head into gear, really. What can you hope for from this weekend? I know you'll be aiming for a win, but
I mean, honestly, a win's would be amazing, but it's probably not where we're at right now. But yeah, honestly, it's really difficult to know. Let's see where we are after qualifying. I think top 10 is feasible. If we have a brilliant race, maybe into the top 5. I don't know, but yeah, that's sort of where we're at, I think.
Best of luck.
Cheers.
Yeah, Alexander Sims, not new to British GT, it must be said. He was actually runner-up in the championship back in 2015, having finished third the year before, again at the wheel of a BMW, one of the old Z4s run by Kyria Kos. He and Marco Attard had much success and actually was a winner here at Brands Hatch the last time that he raced in the championship. So Alexander, I'm sure, playing things down a little bit there, is going to be looking for a good result. Right, here is what we've got of the, fairly significant impact into the barriers for Andre Borodin. The car rotating a few times, having, I think, just caught the end of that tyre wall, so he was quite lucky that he caught the tyres, not the Armco barrier. So Andre getting away with that a little bit. He won't feel like that right now because the car is a bit of a mess, and Greystone GT are going to have some work to do to get it out there for the race tomorrow. Of course, we will not see it in the next qualifying session, though, which will be for the pro drivers. And that means that that car will therefore start from the back of the GT3 grid. So, a dramatic opening qualifying session of the afternoon sees the 2Cs Motorsport Mercedes of James Cottingham set the fastest time by less than a tenth, though, over Morgan Tilbrook in the McLaren. Then it's Adam Ballon third in the Farwell Lamborghini. Then Ian Loggy, the man looking for the championship this weekend, fourth fastest in his qualifying session. Alex Maliakin was quick all through the 10 minutes and rounded out fifth, just ahead of Richard Neary. Henry Dawes, seventh on his debut. And look at the class of driver that he's just out-qualified. Kelvin Fletcher, former class champion. Mia Fluid, one of the quickest AM drivers over the last couple of rounds. Andrew Howard, former British GT champion. Some really, really good names there, rounding out the top 10, and Henry can be very happy with where he has qualified. Nick Halstead, our most recent race winner, is 11th fastest, ahead of Simon Watts in the Rocket RJN car. Then it was Nick Jones ahead of Stuart Proctor, and Andre Borodin had set the 15th time before he headed into the barriers. Right, his co-driver is Ed Peed, who I'm sure is watching on with some concern from the pit lane where Bryn Lucas has found him.
You know, sometimes you want things to go to plan, don't you, Ed? But this is your first time stepping out in the car, and so far it looks pretty battered. I know the team have got a fair bit of work to go.
Yeah, they have. So we just got to see what the damage is and see if we can improve on tomorrow.
Did you see the incident yourself?
No, I didn't see it. So I just saw the aftermath on the TV. So.
Can you give us an insight into what Andre's radioed back to the team?
He said he was okay and just said, I crashed. And that was it, really. So we just have to see how he crashed. Unfortunately, well, the thing was, in qualifying you have to push, and he pushed maybe a little bit too much, or maybe just ran wide, we don't know. And then we just have to keep going.
Now, Andy, just to let you know, I haven't actually seen the incident myself, but I was speaking to the mechanics and they say they've got a lot of work ahead of them, so I'm not sure itself, but that probably doesn't help you out much because you've probably seen it from the pictures. But yeah, Ed is going to have to stand down, I think, for the rest of this session today.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, the car's a mess, Sprint. I'll be honest, it did not look great after that incident in the barriers, but good to see that Andre was okay. He got out of the car in one piece, and Ed Peed disappointed, I'm sure, not to get a go in the car, but let's hope that we get them out in the race tomorrow. So the recovery process is ongoing down at Graham Hill Bend. There'll be a short delay here, I think, before we get the cars out for the next session. There you can see the number 24 McLaren. The back of the car looks okay to look on the positive side, but the front doesn't look very McLaren-ish anymore, does it? So that is certainly going to require probably an all-nighter from the team. They have got 2 cars to run as well, of course, because they've got their regular car for the Proctors, father and son duo, Stuart and Lewis Proctor, car number 5 to run. Maybe they can rob some spares from that side of the garage to get that car back out. Who knows? It's not even unheard of for teams, other McLaren teams, to lend some parts to other McLaren teams that need them. So we shall wait and see, and we keep our fingers crossed that we get that car out in the race. So far so good for Ian Loggy, must be said. 4th fastest within his element of qualifying, and that now sets up Callum Mcleod pretty well to try and at least match that, perhaps go even better. Remember, it is this combined time that matters, though. So if Callum Mcleod were to go out and, for example, only be 7th or 8th fastest in this session, then that could potentially, depending on where everybody else is, send them a bit further down the grid. And that's the last thing they need. They just want a trouble-free afternoon tomorrow. And if you're going to have a trouble-free afternoon, the 2 best places to start are from the front or the back, not in the middle. So 4th place is probably just close enough to the front for Loggy and McLeod that they can relax a little bit. But it's not being helped by the fact that their nearest championship rivals, 2Cs Motorsport, have gone fastest in that first session. So the number 4 Mercedes is looking very quick this weekend, it would seem. And Ian Loggy is going to have to push hard if he's going to beat them. Doesn't need to beat them necessarily in the race tomorrow, but he would certainly like to make certain of the championship. Right, so speaking of Ian Loggy, let's ride on board with him, shall we? Around a lap of the 2.4 mile Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit. Start off with one of the most challenging corners in British motorsport, Paddock Hill Bend. Inch perfect through there, just the right amount of curb use, braking just before the bridge, into the right-hander at Druid. Slow, off-camber right-hander, patient on the throttle, especially in the front-engine Mercedes. Can have a tendency to understeer, not a hint of it there though. Over the curb he goes, just manages to control the wheel spin and the oversteer on the exit of the corner, doesn't run too wide over the curbs, and then takes a very early turn into Surtees. Ideally you want to turn in later than that, but it's so easy to drop a wheel on the grass turning into the corner, and that will ruin your lap altogether. Now you go up through the gears down to the fastest part of the circuit at the bottom of the hill at Pilgrim's Drop, spot your braking point, hurl it into the right-hander. It's all action down there, the back of the car moving around, again right up over the curb on the left-hander, and then through the right-hander at Westfield they go. That's the corner actually where his teammate had it off in the free practice session earlier on today, and you can see there's no room for error if you get it wrong out here. Sheen curve is completely blind, but he handled it perfectly. Then into the cambered left-hander at Stirling's. Again, a very neat and tidy exit there. One more corner to get right now, but it's difficult. You come out of the shade of the trees into the blinding sunshine, pick your apex, he just about gets there. And then again, over a crest, the car goes light, easy to understeer wide, but Ian Loggy with a very neat and tidy lap around the track, and that was actually his fastest lap of the session, good enough to be 4th fastest in the first part of qualifying. Now, fastest in that session, though, was James Cottingham in the number 4 2Cs Motorsport Mercedes, and he is down in the pit lane now with Bryn Lucas.
Fastest man out on track so far then, James. We've seen you hopping between cars in your career, but getting out there today in Brands Hatch and doing the job straight away.
Yeah, as I said to you before the session, I think it plays to my advantage that I jump in and out of cars so much. So I think for a lot of the AMs this weekend, a big disadvantage is not having the Friday testing. So we've had 1.5 free practice sessions due to a red flag this morning, and I have the ability to sort of get on the pace quite quickly as a result of that diversity in the cars that I drive. So yeah, I'm really happy with the way it went, and just wanted to get my head down I kind of feel like there was more time in it still to come. So yeah, really pleased with it.
Ominous signs. Now Lewis has got a job to do, but you've shown you have the pace. If he can get his head down as well, it looks pretty good for you guys ahead of tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, the car's been fabulous all day. You know, every circuit we've been to, I could complain about the car, but today it's just been really good. So he's got a great tool for the job. Hopefully, you know, fingers crossed he can deliver that equal pole to mine.
Well, his car's certainly been looking good the last few rounds. Good luck for the rest of the day.
Cheers, thank you.
Yes, for James Cottingham and Lewis Williamson, one job to do tomorrow. That is to beat Ian Logie and Callum Mcleod. If they can do that, then they should keep the championship at least mathematically alive to Donington Park, but they need to beat them by as many places as possible to really keep that pressure on into the final 2-hour race, the Donington decider at the end of the season. Right, excellent work by the marshals, the recovery crews down there at Graham Hill Bend. They've got the car out of the way, the bits of the car that were strewn across the track out of the way, and they've got the barrier repaired very quickly, so we are able to get qualifying back underway here at Brands Hatch. Then with qualifying 2 for GT3, the pro drivers jump in, and a reminder, it is their time combined with the fastest time from session 1, which sets the grid. So I'll be talking to you mainly about the combined times, but it's also worth keeping a note of who the quicker pro drivers are over the course of this session, because that could become relevant in the second stint of tomorrow's race. Of course, it's the AM drivers who start the race. The pros jump in at around the halfway mark, so this is an important session for the pros as well to lay down the marker as they head into the weekend. Of course, we're all racing under a little bit of a dark cloud this weekend as we mourn the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. All of the cars carrying tributes over the weekend, and Union flags on the windscreen banners as well. A lovely touch. Some teams choosing to go a little bit further. Had a 2-minute silence earlier on today as well. I've never heard a racetrack fall more quiet than it did, as everyone had a chance to have a moment of reflection on what has been a very, very sad last few days here in the United Kingdom. So qualifying 2 then for the Intelligent Money British GT Championship underway. Pro drivers perhaps have a tendency to get up to speed a little bit more quickly than the AMs, and so we could well see the fastest lap times in this session coming a little bit earlier on. You're riding on board here with Marcus Clutton. This car, remember, was second fastest in Q1 in the hands of his co-driver. And now Marcus is going to try and do the job of getting that car back on pole position. When they're on it, this team, they are really on it. See Donington Park a couple of months ago. What can they do here at Brands Hatch, where Morgan Tilbrook, of course, made his British GT debut at the start of last season and never even made it to the start of the race because he crashed on the warm-up lap. They didn't even take the start. What a difference 12 months or so makes. They're now one of the fastest driver combos in the championship. Just need to work on a bit more consistency, I think. Marcus Clutton, though, right now, not thinking about consistency, thinking about outright speed. He bounces and bobbles over the curb there at Graham Hill Bend as he wrestles the number 77 car out towards Surtees. Lots of oversteer. I don't think he's quite got these Pirelli tyres into the ideal operating window just yet. He is fastest, no, he's not fastest in Sector 1. Fastest in Sector 1 is James Dorlin in the Red Line Racing Lamborghini that was piloted very rapidly by Alex Maliakin in the first part of qualifying. But Marcus Clutton looking now to try and settle down a bit. I don't think this will be his fastest lap of the session, but it's certainly been a spectacular one as he wriggles the McLaren 720S GT3 around the Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit into the left-hander at Stirling's. Oh, you can see visibly there how much more commitment there is in the cars now. The body language of the cars changing completely as the pro drivers jump in. One of the things that really defines a pro driver is their ability to get straight onto the pace, but I don't think Marcus Clutton has the car underneath him right now. Another big moment there at Clearways. It's been a scrappy lap, this, for Clutton, and I don't think that it's going to be enough to put him anywhere near the top. Well, he's second fastest so far in this session, but we will definitely see lap times quicker than this. Callum Mcleod at the moment, fastest in the championship, leading number 6 Mercedes. Scott Mulvan's just gone second in the Team Parker Racing Porsche, and you ride on board then with James Dorlin, who heads through Paddock Hill Bend, and he is, he didn't actually register a lap time. I know he did, it was just a very slow lap, so I think a little bit like his teammate Maliakin, he perhaps had to back off towards the end of it to try and make sure that he didn't get balked by any traffic. So now Dorlin can push as he heads down the Cooper Straight in the Lamborghini. Another Lamborghini's just gone fastest, Sandy Mitchell to the top of the individual times and the combined times as well. So the number 72 Lamborghini at the moment on provisional pole position. and that fastest lap in the session for Sandy Mitchell, a 1:23.182, 3/10 better than anybody else. On board though with Dorlin as he turns through Hawthorne. There is Mitchell. He's got a nice little slipstream as well from Lewis Williamson in the 2Cs Mercedes, who's only now starting his first flying lap. So as we saw in the first session, the 2Cs Mercedes a little bit late out onto the track. They're in no great rush to get Williamson out there. They clearly feel that he can get the business done even with just half a session in the car. Sandy Mitchell, fastest at the moment then, the Lamborghini, which is definitely still in championship contention. At the moment set to start on pole position on combined times, which is what you're seeing on your screens. It is the Mitchell car fastest then, except it isn't, because Marcus Clutton has just gone to pole position. Marcus Clutton in the Enduro Motorsport McLaren pips Sandy Mitchell to pole on combined times by 1/10.5. The McLaren is faster than the Lamborghini. Now, is Mitchell going faster on this lap? The answer is no. He's not improved in either of the first two sectors, and he hits the brakes heading down towards clearways as he bails out of that lap. So no response just yet for Mitchell. What about anybody else? Are we getting purple sectors elsewhere? Yes, we are. Lewis Williamson, purple in the middle sector then. The yellow Mercedes, which must be coming towards the end of the lap now, going faster than anybody in the middle sector, and it goes to pole position by almost 4/10 of a second. Lewis Williamson then in the 2Cs Motorsport Mercedes. It was fastest in session 1. It is currently fastest in session 2. And this, therefore, with 4.5 minutes of qualifying left, is the car on provisional pole position. Lewis Williamson, he's still pushing on though. Can he improve again on this lap? He crosses the timing beam at the end of sector 1, and he's a couple of tenths off the fastest sector 1 time, which has just been set by James Dorlin. James Dorlin in the middle sector at the moment in the black and red Lamborghini. We are on board with him now as he heads towards Sheen Curve. The middle sector ends just here as we turn into Stirling's. It's a personal best in sector 2 as well. So Dorlin on combined times needs to find how much to get pole position. He needs to find about 8/10 to get pole. That's a big margin of time to try and find. He might not be able to get all of that, but he could well jump up onto the front row of the grid. Let's see the Lamborghini across the timing line now, and he goes third fastest, 76 thousandths away from a front row starting slot for Dorlin. It is the fastest individual lap time in this second session by 13 thousandths over Lewis Williamson, but on combined times only good enough for third. So here comes the Barwell Lamborghini. What's Mitchell up to on this lap? Again, no improvements in the sectors for him. So have we seen the best from Sandy Mitchell? A 1:23.182. The fastest two drivers in the session, Dorlin and Williamson, both just dipping into the 22.9s, and then 23s for everybody else pretty much. Let's see whether anybody else is going to be able to improve. James Dorlin then on his next lap is not improving in the first sector. We're getting a couple of personal best sectors, but as I suspected would be the case, the fastest lap times coming right at the start of the session, I think, or at least through the middle part of the session, once they've got their outlaps done with. Whoa, Williamson way wide over the grass coming out of Surtees. That was a scary moment. Might not be the fastest corner on this Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit, but it's still very easy to lose control if you start doing that. Just take a look at what happened to the Greystone GT McLaren in the earlier session. That was not a particularly high-speed accident, but it could still be costly, and Williamson knows that it's now worth backing off because having had a scary moment, the lap has gone anyway, and the last thing he needs to do is to bend this car against a barrier and give the team work to do to get it race ready for tomorrow. He might have one more go at this though. Looks like he is sort of backing off in a way that is just designed to cool the tyres off, make sure he's got track temperature. Yeah, he's weaving around, just making sure that the tyres are clean, and he will have another crack at this, but the number 4 machine already on provisional pole, I remind you, by nearly 4/10 of a second, 0.396 up on the Enduro Motorsport McLaren in second, the Redline Lamborghini in third, the Barwell Lamborghini in fourth, and then the Ram Racing number 6 car fifth on the grid at the moment then for Callum Mcleod and Ian Logie. Remember, only Logie can win the championship because McLeod hasn't done every race with him. It's the driver that scores the points rather than the cars, which is why we have this slightly odd situation where Ian Loggie's going for a solo championship in a championship made up of exclusively 2 driver teams. So Sandy Mitchell then having one more go at this. Then he's got time for 2 more laps actually, but his sector times haven't been brilliant of late, and that continues on this lap. Marcus Clutton though has just done a personal best in the first sector. So Clutton might not be able to beat Williamson to pole, but he could make second place on the grid a bit more secure. And there is the 77 car, and he's going to catch Mcleod at the worst possible moment, and that's a very close moment indeed, and that will not go down very well for Marcus Clutton, as Callum Mcleod was backing off through a blind right-hander, and Marcus Clutton came through the corner at full speed and found the Mercedes right on the racing line, so that really ruins what was a promising lap for Clutton. And he might now have had the best of the tyres. He's going to go again. Thankfully for him, Sam Neary pulls into the pit lane, so that leaves him with some clear space, but that will have definitely got Marcus Clutton's heart rate up. Well, let's take a look then, shall we? On board with Clutton, so you can see how far behind the Mercedes he is. You can see Mcleod slowing, but he's committed to the corner by this point, and then out of the corner, Mcleod seems to hit the brakes. What was that all about? So near to contact. Brilliant reactions there from Marcus to avoid hitting the Mercedes, and I wonder whether there might be a conversation about that after the session, because that was almost an enormous accident. Well avoided by Marcus there. Callum Mcleod may have some explaining to do. Meanwhile, more and more cars heading for the pit lane. I think most drivers realising that they've had the best of their tyres, they've had the best perhaps of themselves, and are not likely to see any more major improvements. The odd personal best sector coming in. Won't be a huge surprise to you to hear that this incident is under investigation. I mean, it's right on the racing line there, and Clutton was fully committed. I've seen penalties given for less than that, let's put it that way. Checkered flag is out though, the session is done, and it looks as though Clutton has bailed on his next lap as well, so that did end up being his best lap, or his last chance to set an improved lap in the session. Mcleod, though, annoyingly for Clutton, is still going. He actually, having backed off, has gone for another lap, but is not improving at the moment. Callum Mcleod, interestingly, only 8th fastest within this session. That's still good enough for 6th on the grid, for 5th on the grid, excuse me. But within this individual session, Mcleod not quite as competitive as Loggy was in the AM session. So, very dramatic pair of qualifying sessions. We're only halfway done now as well, because the GT4 cars are being prepared. There you can see them in the pit lane. They'll be out next. And qualifying here at Brands Hatch was expected to be tight in the times, but we weren't expecting quite as many close quarters moments out on the circuit. But that's what happens when you get 14 GT3 cars all trying to find the bit of clear air they want at the right time of the session when the tyres are in the ideal window. And sometimes they end up almost tripping over each other. So James Dorlin then fastest within session 2, but on combined lap times, the pole position looks like it's going to 2C's Motorsport, and that is a big deal as far as the championship is concerned. Lewis Williamson setting the 2nd fastest time in that session, and that's enough for he and James Cottingham, Bryn, to get the pole position.
Well, James, we're giving you quite a bit of airtime. It's going quite well for you today, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, just couldn't tell you how happy I am that we've finally managed to get a pole this season, and Lewis did a great job. And yeah, as I said to you just now, it's about consistency of the pairing. So I think we both did a great job. Yeah, there we are at the front of the grid.
Front of the grid, looking good. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Bryn. A very, very happy James Cottingham then. The 2C's Motorsport squad celebrating a provisional pole position, and by 0.4 of a second when you consider how close the rest of the times are, and indeed the individual times within the sessions have been. That is a big, big margin. So 2C's looking good, and fastest time of the day so far then of a 22.96 for Dorlin, but a 9.8 for Williamson. He was right up there on pace. Of course, we saw Cottingham was fastest of the AM drivers as well. That bodes well for their race tomorrow. So GT3 qualifying done with them, and 2Cs will line up alongside Enduro Motorsport, who had that close moment with the Ram Racing Mercedes late on in the session. Marcus Clutton still managing to set a time good enough to put their car onto the front row. Redline in 3rd, Barwell in 4th. So guess what? Those 4 cars that will line up across the first 4 positions on the grid, they are the 4 teams who could still beat Ian Loggy to the championship, and they've all out-qualified him. So that makes for a very, very tasty first stint of the race tomorrow. Here is confirmation then of the GT3 qualifying results on combined times. It's Williamson and Cottingham on pole, from Clutton and Tilbrook, the McLaren at 2nd, and then the Lamborghini of Dorlin and Malik in 3rd, out-qualifying the Barwell Lamborghini of Sandy Mitchell and Adam Ballon, with Callum Callum Mcleod and Ian Loggy, 5th on the grid, but behind all of their nearest championship rivals. The Nearies will line up 6th ahead of Alexander Sims and Henry Dawes. Very impressive debut for them in the Century BMW. That's about the furthest up the order that car's been all season. Then a brace of McLarens, the 76 car of Hankey and Fluid ahead of the paddock example of Plowman and Fletcher, and the Fox Motorsport McLaren of Jamie Stanley and Nick Halstead. Then it's the Team Parker Porsche of Malvern and Jones ahead of James Kell and Simon Watts 12th. Chris Froggatt and Andrew Howard in the Sky Tempesta Mercedes are 13th, ahead of the Proctors 14th, and of course Ed Peed and Andre Borodin last on the grid after Borodin's off in Q1. Right, we saw the close moment there for Callum Mcleod and Marcus Clutton, and Brink can get at least half of the story now as he's down at Ram Racing.
Well, Callum, it's like a baptism of fire returning, isn't it, to the British GT? And out there on track, you had a bit of a squeaky moment, didn't you, as well behind. Can you talk us through what happened on that moment? The one we're referring to, of course, is where you almost got somebody in the back of your car.
To be fair, I was just trying to stay offline, and I think offline on the way into turn 7, I think, is on the left, but on the way out, it's obviously online. And the closing speeds were clearly very high. So I've not seen it, but I believe I may have I've been told could have got in the way of another car or nearly collected. So if that was the case, then obviously completely unintentional. So yeah.
Now, it seems like a nasty thing to do, but we have got it for you. So we just pull it for you and have a look on the screen behind as well, and we'll try and get your thoughts as well, because, I mean, it's racing, it happens, doesn't it?
Yeah, to be fair, because I'd already backed off, I was just trying to keep it to the left to allow Marcus to take the racing line. I hadn't realised it was Marcus, so I saw that. But yeah, no, it's one of those things. When you're cooling down around the back, you can't really see a lot behind you because it's a constant kind of radius from the moment you get to Hawthorne. So again, if that did impede him, and apologies, but yeah.
Still a decent qualifying. Thanks so much for talking to us. I know it's not easy in those circumstances, but thank you.
Cheers, thank you.
I have never yet heard a guilty racing driver give an interview, and Callum Mcleod, I think, realising there just how close that got to pretty sizable contact. Thankfully, they avoided it, though, and Marcus Clutton was at least able to get his McLaren onto the front row. Right, that's GT3 qualifying done with. GT4 qualifying is already underway, actually, and in GT3 we have a championship that could be wrapped up tomorrow. I would be very, very surprised if GT4 gets wrapped up tomorrow, because it is a very close championship fight that we have within the GT4 ranks. Matt Topham and Darren Turner's Newbridge Motorsport Aston Martin has a 1-point cushion over Josh Miller and Jamie Day's R Racing Aston, and they in turn are a point ahead of Richard Williams and Senan Fielding in their Audi. So the top 3 teams in GT4 covered by 2 points, with still over 70 points available. That one is very likely to rumble on to the very end of the season, but this could still be a very, very important qualifying session. The Team Brit McLaren here we're focusing on, and quite rightly so, because they were one of the stars of the show, if not the star of the show actually, at Spa last time out, where they raced their way to an overall GT4 podium for the first time, and after a particularly impressive second stint for Bobby Trunley, where he actually fended off and then ran away from the Darren Turner, championship leader Darren Turner, winner at Le Mans Darren Turner. Bobby Trunley, in his first season of racing at this level, managed to put in a really good performance, and Aaron Morgan, his teammate, also really impressive in the first half of the race, and that was a real feel-good end to the Spa weekend, which saw that championship battle tighten up quite a bit. The win for R Racing, a slightly disappointing result for Newbridge, and it all of a sudden becomes a lot closer than they would like. Academy Motorsport are mathematically still in contention for the title as well. They're 20 points behind the championship leaders. We're about, though, to head down to the pit lane, I believe, to hear from Joe Wheeler-Brink.
Well, Joe, we're watching your teammate going on out there at the moment, doing the best he can. He's been a decent teammate for you over the years, but I know you've got a lot of pressure on you because your mum and family are watching from the truck here as well.
Yes, they are. I've heard that. They've managed to sneak their way up there, so I know they'll be watching every corner.
First season in British GT this year. It's been a baptism of fire for you. You've had to learn a lot. You know, how do you look back at it so far?
Yeah, definitely. Coming from juniors is a big step up, big speed difference. Yeah, but you know, it's a natural progression for juniors in such a high, to a high extent. The competition's really high.
Well, a quick message for your mum.
Won't crash. Try not to.
Thanks, Joe.
It's all right. All good.
That's excellent. When he says the truck, he means the TV truck. He's actually sat right behind our director, watching all of the goings-on behind the scenes. And I can actually hear them laughing at that comment. That's quite a unique thing. Right then, Joe Wheeler will be out in the car next. At the moment, of course, it's Freddie Tomlinson in the Ginetta for this first part of qualifying. We're following here Marco Signoretti in the Academy Ford Mustang, the number 61 car, which, as I started to say before, was only 20 points off the championship lead, so a good final couple of rounds for them could put them right back into the championship mix, and Signoretti goes second fastest in qualifying. It's Jamie Orton in the Porsche who is fastest by just under a quarter of a second. Then Jamie Day is third, looking for Matt Topham, and he is all the way down in sixth at the moment, of only 8 to have set a time, and a big wobble there for Signoretti. The Ford Mustang can be a little bit lively on application of the throttle out of a tight corner, and we just saw exactly how lively it can get coming out of Druids. There then is Freddie Wheeler, the Ginetta out of clearways through Clark Curve. Now a purple first sector, so that was faster than anybody in Sector 1, an improvement on his own previous best in Sector 2. And where is the Ginetta going to go? It goes 5th fastest then, so Freddie Tomlinson, how tight it was. I was about to say he was only a couple of tenths off pole position, but now Tom Edgar has gone fastest in the Toyota there in the background by 3 3/4 tenths of a second. So let's call that nearly 4 tenths is the advantage for the Toyota Gazoo Racing UK car. Tom Edgar dropping down out of Druids Corner. That Toyota went well here last year. In fact, the last couple of years, the Toyota has been strong at this kind of track. The more tight and technical circuits do seem to be where the Toyota excels. Gets off the tight corners really, really well. Lots of body roll in the Supra as well, which perhaps helps it through some of those tighter corners. Now, in the early part of the season, a lot of the talk was about this car, wasn't it? The stellar Audi. Richard Williams at the wheel of it right now. He has not yet actually set a lap time. He's been out there for a couple of laps, so I can only imagine he's had some lap times disallowed. Was that a car on the grass then that he just went past going into Stirling's? I think it was, wasn't it? But Richard doesn't back off too much. He does lose a bit of time, though, in Sector 2. Yeah, they really dominated the early part of the season, won both of the first 2 races at Alton Park, had a second place at Silverstone, but then they've struggled a bit since then, had a non-finish a couple of races ago as well at Donington, and they need to try and get their season back on track. 5th fastest for Williams at the moment, but he is only 2 points off the championship lead, held by Topham and Turner, who he is quicker than at the moment. Matt Topham's still only 9th place right now, but it's the car that actually splits those two in the championship, which currently is fastest by 6 thousandths of a second. It is Jamie Day on fastest time. No, it's not. It's Freddie Tomlinson. Freddie Tomlinson, a 1:31.5, and that was over a 10.5 quicker than Tom Edgar. Fantastic stuff then. Tomlinson on pole, or fastest in the session, I should say, at the moment. And now Joe Wheeler really will be feeling the nerves, because he's going to have to go out there in a minute and back this up. The Ginetta always goes well here, either the G56, which we're seeing now, or its predecessors, the G55 and the G50. They've always gone well around Brands Hatch. It's just a circuit that really seems to suit that car, and Freddie Tomlinson and Joe Wheeler both really gelling with it as the season's gone on, and that's a really, really impressive time, that, from Freddie Tomlinson. The rest are going to find it very hard to beat, I would imagine. So Tomlinson then fastest, Tom Edgar second in the Toyota, Jamie Day third in the Aston Martin, Will Orton fourth in the Porsche, Signoretti fifth in the Mustang. This has been the story of the season this year. So much variety at the head of the GT4 field. And then it's the BMW of Jack Brown, who are following through Dingledell up into Sheen Curve, ahead of the Audi, and then Mo Ritson's McLaren. So yeah, I think that's 8 different makes of car in the top 8 at the moment in GT4. Not many championships out there can boast those sort of numbers. Brilliant, brilliant competitive field in GT4. Freddie Tomlinson, by the way, not content with going fastest in this session. He's going even quicker again on his next lap. Here comes the Ginetta, 2 purple sectors. Look, he's a 10.5 up on even his previous best, and this is all significant. The bigger a margin he can have in this session, the less work there is for Joe Wheeler to do in the second session to get them on pole position. Tomlinson comes through, moves the goalposts by quite a bit. 3.5 tenths faster now than the rest of the field. No one else can get near them, although Jamie Day has just done a middle sector that was fractionally quicker, 0.5 tenth quicker than Tomlinson, but the first sector was 4 tenths slower, so I don't think the R Racing Aston is going to go to the top again, but we might well see some improvements. In fact, Tom Edgar has track limits. That lap time for Freddie Tomlinson disallowed for exceeding track limits at turn 3. That's Graham Hill Bend. So that lap time gets deleted. And Jamie Day, therefore, is able to go quicker than the Ginetta. So he wouldn't have beaten that latest time, but when that time was disallowed, Jamie Day was able to do just enough by 1/10 of a second to go quicker than Freddie Tomlinson. So it's Aston Martin to the front now, and R Racing in desperate need of a good result here to try and get that championship lead heading to Donington Park. They're only a point adrift of the Newbridge Aston Martin, which is in the pit lane and only 9th in the time. So Matt Topham, who is an AM driver, it's worth mentioning, most of the other drivers in the GT4 field are silver graded drivers. And that's the difference really between GT4 and GT3 as far as the driver gradings are concerned. GT3 is exclusively Pro-Am, one Pro driver, one AM driver, but in GT4 we have lots of these Silver Cup teams, and the majority of them are 2 silver graded drivers. Of course, a silver slightly quicker than an AM, but not quite as quick as a Pro. So when Darren Turner jumps into that Newbridge Aston Martin in qualifying session number 2, he should in theory have an advantage over the rest of them, but whether it's enough to make up the 9/10 of a second deficit that Topham sits at in this session, we shall have to wait and see. So time ticking down, then 15 seconds to go. We're still getting lots of personal best sectors though, lots of improved times here, even deep into the session. Tom Edgar has slipped down to 3rd fastest now, though he, despite having a personal best middle sector last time, wasn't quite able to improve upon a 31.7. He was only a 10th off though, so he may choose to keep pushing on this lap. Looks like he is, takes a nice line through Graham Hill now. I think he's backed off now actually, as he didn't use all of the road coming out of the left-hander. So Tom Edgar perhaps settling for 3rd fastest in the session. It's extremely tight though. I made the point we've got 8 different makes of car in the top 8. They are covered by 7/10 of a second, those top 8 cars in the session. It's ridiculously close, and that means that the second session could change everything. There is Richard Williams then. The Audi turns through Sterling's, the number 42 car. Personal best in both the first 2 sectors. This is a good lap for Williams. 7/10 off pole position, but a couple of tenths would take him well inside the top 5. And, well, he's only about a 1/4 of a second off pole. This could be 3rd or 4th fastest for Williams. Out of Clark Curve he comes, takes the shortest route to the line, crosses the line now, and the lap time goes 4th fastest. He is only 4/10 away now from Jamie Day's time, and that's good news for Senan Fielding, who will take over the Audi for the second session. Again, he doesn't have quite as big a chunk of time to find to challenge for pole position. So the majority of cars have either seen the checkered flag or are in the pit lane, getting a couple of improvements from further back. The number 10 car, for example, of Darren Leon with personal best in Sector 1. Darren making his British GT Championship debut in a second SRO Motorsports Ginetta. This one was having some work done to it after a gravelly excursion in second free practice session earlier on this afternoon. But they've cleared the gravel out of the car, and Darren is about to set what should be his fastest lap of the session. Will it move him off the bottom of the timing screen? Oh, not quite. 61,000 slower than Aaron Morgan, but Darren, another AM driver in a field of mainly silvers. We've got 4 Pro-Am entries actually in GT4 this weekend, which I think is the most we've had this season. Right, it's R Racing with the early advantage in qualifying, and they catch up now with Bryn.
Well, Jamie, I don't know how much you know, but Freddie got his lap taken away, and you then propelled yourself up there to 1st place, provisional pole, depending on what your teammate can do.
Yeah, I think we put a good session together, a bit sloppy in areas. The lap before my best was a bit better in Sector 1, so I think if we put it all together, we could have probably been provisional pole without Freddie getting his lap taken away. But yeah, still happy nonetheless to get pole position. Handing it over to Josh now to see what he can do, and we've been fast both together in free practice, so yeah, looking for a good result at the end of quali.
What is the dynamic between you then and your teammate? You know, you're working so hard together, but you have to be on the same page, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. We're now on the same page. It took us a few rounds at the start, being fresh into the GTs, but now we're just getting going from strength to strength every weekend. Now getting 2 wins out of the last 3, and hopefully to get another one this weekend.
Yeah. Good luck, Josh. Jamie, and thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Do you know, I've been doing that all year, calling him Josh Day and Jamie Miller. It is Jamie Day who's just done that job in the first session, and Josh Miller will head out for the next part of qualifying. The first part of GT4 qualifying, though, topped by the R Racing Aston Martin ahead of the Assetto Ginetta. Then it's the Toyota of Tom Edgar 3rd, the Audi of Richard Williams 4th, the Porsche of Jamie Orton 5th, the Ford Mustang of Marco Signoretti 6th fastest, then the BMW of Jack Brown ahead of the McLaren of Mo Ritson. 8 different makes of car across the top 8 positions. Then it's the Aston Martin of Matt Topham, who was the fastest AM driver in that session. Be interesting to see what Darren Turner can do. Topham was only 9/10 away from the fastest time in that session. Then Tom Rawlings ahead of Mark Radcliffe, the second of the AM drivers. Then Aaron Morgan and Darren Leon, again AM drivers, rounding out the 13-car grid. And it's not, though, of course, the full grid set. We've still got another 10 minutes of qualifying to come for the GT4s, and the qualifying sessions sort of replicating the way that their championship is looking. It's so finely poised, and any one of a number of different teams with a number of different types of car could be champion. And the same is true of the chase for pole position here this afternoon at a slightly gloomier looking Brands Hatch, I have to say. A few more clouds just starting to roll in, but I don't think there's any immediate threat of rain. I've said that now, of course, which means the heavens are bound to open any moment now, but looking out of the commentary box window, it looks pretty pleasant, the direction from which the weather's coming. And that's certainly what the teams want, because the cars will all be set up with full all-attack qualifying style dry settings, and a change of conditions during qualifying, as indeed is the case during the race really, would really mix things up. There is a threat of rain tomorrow though, actually, an ongoing threat throughout the whole day really, so a good chance that we could have a weather affected race, and there are a few teams out there who would rub their hands with glee at that prospect, and quite a few who would probably not be feeling quite as happy about that. So our racing then, the Ginetta team, really, and these are two ex-Ginetta Junior drivers at the wheel of the number 23 car, Jamie Day and Josh Miller. Been very, very rapid this season, and they started off pretty rapid, but they've definitely improved a lot as the year's gone on. And Ginetta Junior producing quite a lot of very, very rapid GT talent, because of course the Assetto pairing that we've been talking about earlier on in the session of Freddie Tomlinson and Joe Wheeler, also ex-Ginetta Junior drivers. In fact, if you look up at some of the very top levels these days of motor racing, you find drivers who came out of Ginetta Junior racing. One, Lando Norris, for example, a former champion. So Ginetta well established here on the British GT package, with not only their cars in the GT4 field, but also a couple of the support series here with us this weekend at Brands Hatch. And if you do want to start motor racing, then you can do a lot worse than getting in touch with Lawrence Tomlinson and getting yourself into a Ginetta. Right now, though, it is an Aston Martin that everybody is chasing in GT4 qualifying. Not this one, but this perhaps could be the fastest car in this part of qualifying, because now Darren Turner, a fully fledged pro driver, is going to be up against a lot of silver-graded drivers who are quick, don't get me wrong, but Darren, with all of his years of experience in GT cars, in touring cars, he's had success in pretty much everything he's ever driven, Darren Turner, and has really, really been enjoying his GT4 adventure over the last season and a half or so, alongside his good mate Matt Topham, ex-Caterham racer Matt Topham, and Darren actually says he kind of prefers driving the GT4 cars over the GT3 and even GTE cars that he's had success with in the past, because these cars move around a bit more. They're not quite as powerful, but they don't have the aero either, so they slide around a bit more. They're much more physically demanding cars to drive, and I think Darren quite enjoying that, actually. There goes the Paddock Motorsport McLaren, and that is the number 26 car. Mo Ritson was out in it in the first part of qualifying. Adam Hatfield now takes over for the second part of the session, and they will be looking to try and improve slightly upon where they ended up in Q1. They were 8th fastest in the hands of Mo Ritson. On board with Sennan Fielding, that late improvement for Richard Williams, how significant could that prove to be? Got to within 0.4 of a second of the fastest time in that session, which means that Sennan Fielding needs to find 0.4 over the R Racing Aston Martin in this one, and he might just be challenging for pole position. Was a bit wide out of paddock. We saw Sennan, was it at Snetterton? I forget which round it was now. One of the races earlier this season having all sorts of issues with lap times being disallowed in qualifying, and he'll want to avoid that. There are 2 or 3 key places, this being one of them, where they are very carefully monitoring those track limits. The pressure pad sensors on the outside edge of the curbs will send a photograph straight to race control to let them know exactly who it was that exceeded track limits and by how much, and then the lap time will be deleted in qualifying. Of course, in the race you start getting time penalties added on if you do it too many times, so it's a good habit to get into, sticking within the white lines. Sennan Fielding brings the Stella Motorsport Audi through Hawthorne up towards Westfield Corner. Always looks like it's beautifully balanced, this Audi, and they've really got to grips with the new Pirelli tyres in 2022 as well, as some of the teams have floundered a bit on the new compound. Stella really seemed to wrap their head around that right from the get-go, really, and that double win at Alton Park really proved that, because that second race win came on top of a 10-second success penalty that came as a result of the win in race 1, and they still managed to come through and win the second one as well. So Sennan Fielding and Richard Williams have been a formidable duo this season. Can they get themselves back into the championship lead before the end of the weekend? Well, this might be the first sign, because Fielding is about to come across the line now and does go to provisional pole position then, but is immediately beaten by Jordan Collard. So there we go, he was briefly on pole, but then the Toyota by 16 thousandths of a second goes fractionally quicker than him. There you can see the Toyota again looming ominously in the background. Jordan Collard really wrestling that Toyota Gazoo Racing UK Supra around the circuit to go fractionally quicker than the Audi, well actually slower than the Audi in this session, but on combined times is ahead. So a reminder that the order you're seeing on the left-hand side of your screen, that is the grid order, that is the combined times, and you can see that it's the R Racing car back to pole position, and that's the number 9 Century BMW off the road, and that is a red flag. Chris Salkeld's car stationary at the side of the track. That's on the exit of Sterling's. Now, there is a suspicious-looking skid mark across the track heading towards the barrier. Now, I didn't really see any damage on the BMW, but the fact that they've chosen to throw a red flag means that the marshals down there don't seem to think that that car's going to move, which might suggest there is some damage to it. We'll see if we can find out what happened there, but Chris Salkeld, who hadn't set a lap time yet either, has unfortunately brought about our second red flag of qualifying. Just moments after Josh Miller went to pole position. If Josh Miller had set that lap time a few seconds later, it wouldn't have counted because the red flags would have been out, but Josh Miller just got across the line and by 55 thousandths of a second has taken the R Racing Aston Martin back to pole position. There you can see Chris Salkeld getting out of the BMW. There must be damage then on the right-hand side that we can't see from here. He's looking at the right rear and then the right front, but it looks as though perhaps he's clattered into the barriers. And maybe Bryn can find out something from the Century Motorsport garage, see if they have heard. Of course, the drivers all in radio contact with the teams, so Chris Salkeld, I'm sure the first thing he'll have done, after he swore at himself probably, will be to have jumped on the radio and told the team exactly what had happened. So there is the car then that provisionally is on pole position. The red flag flies, the time stops, so this does not eat into the 10-minute session. We still have just under 6 minutes to go. Only 8 cars so far have set a lap time in Q2. So it is the Audi of Sen and Fielding fastest within this individual session, but that's only good enough for third on the grid. The top 3 on the grid, though, Miller's Aston, Collard's Toyota and Fielding's Audi, separated by less than a tenth of a second. So, and they will not even be the fastest laps of the session. I'm pretty confident of that. So we are likely to see that pole position change hands at least another few times in the session. Unless, of course, it rains. I'm still confident it's not going to, but the longer we sit under red flag conditions, the less confident I get, because the clouds continue to move in, and it is noticeably darker out there at the moment. Recovery vehicles heading out towards that part of the circuit, and they will help to extricate the BMW M4 GT4 from its precarious position at the side of the track. And hopefully they'll get that done nice and quickly. So for the time being then, it's R Racing on pole with the Toyota second fastest. Then it's Sen and Fielding and Richard Williams third. Seb Hopkins has gone fourth place in the Porsche. And carry on running through that in a moment or two, though, because Tom Rawlings, who is Chris Salkeld's teammate, is down in the pit lane now with Bryn, hopefully with some news of what's just happened to Chris.
Well, Tom, looking at the pictures, it's a strange place to go off, isn't it? Have you heard anything from Chris at all?
No, I've not heard anything yet. I just, by the looking at it there, I think he's just lost it coming out of the GP loop. He might have just clipped the ball, but hopefully he'll be all right and we'll be good to go tomorrow.
So no word as to whether or not the car's going to be able to have extensive work done overnight?
No, nothing yet. We don't know the damage yet, but hopefully, yeah, hopefully it'll be all right. So,
thanks, Tom.
No worries.
Bryn, unfortunately, having to chat to quite a few disappointed drivers in this qualifying session. That's our second red flag incident. The good news is this doesn't look quite as serious as the Andre Borodin incident in GT3 qualifying 1. That car really was wrecked. This BMW looks like it might be a bit more salvageable. Now, that is a view of, well, that's a view of a very tasty car park over on the South Bank. The spectators, a good crowd here today, actually, for a Saturday. The main race day, of course, is tomorrow here at Brands Hatch, but quite a lot of spectators have made the journey to Brands Hatch on the Saturday to watch qualifying and a few of the support races and enjoying their time sat in front of their very nice cars on the South Bank there. And as we look towards the sky, I'm trying to work out which way the wind. It's not a very windy day, actually. The flags above the Brands Hatch Tower are blowing as if it's a tailwind down the pit straight. So what we're looking at there has already been and gone. It's the weather coming from the other direction that perhaps is what we need to worry about. And the longer we sit under this red flag, the longer it takes to get this BMW out of the way, the more concerned the teams will become about the potential for a change of conditions. And if that were to happen, then those who would really lose out are those who hadn't yet set a lap time. So obviously we know Chris Salkeld hadn't set a lap time, nor had Benji Hetherington in his Porsche, Adam Hatfield in the McLaren, Joe Wheeler in the McLaren, in the Ginetta, excuse me, and also the number 10 Ginetta of Charlie Robertson. Those 5 drivers haven't yet registered a lap time in Q2. Now, the rule is that if your car only sets a lap time in one of its 2 sessions, then it doesn't matter how quick they were in that session, they will still start from the back of their class on the grid. So if we were to have a change of conditions, that would certainly affect those who haven't yet registered a lap, but fingers crossed that won't be the case. The fact that this is taking some time does suggest that the right-hand side of that car is not quite as pristine as the left. I think it's definitely got some damage, because if it had simply stalled and Chris just couldn't get it fired back up again, which was a possibility, they'd have just pushed it straight up onto that low loader straight away. But damaged wheels, damaged suspension will obviously delay the process slightly. So it might be a few more minutes before we get the session back underway. Now, spoke a lot about Matt Topham in that first part of GT4 qualifying. Brink can catch up with him now in the pits.
Frustrating for you, especially seeing the other Aston doing so well out on track. And to put you straight on the spot, Matt, what happened out there for you?
Oh, not a lot. I pushed as hard as I could. That's possibly the best lap time I've done around this track, full stop. For me, it's, you know, I'm an amateur, they're silvers. They've clearly got a lot of pace this year. The Aston's very good round here, they're proving that. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy with my lap. I just can't close that gap to them. They're young.
You said, I'm older, don't worry. No, you said to me just before that 1/10 a corner is sort of, that's 9/10 by the end of a lap. When you do 20 laps, you can see the significance of the issue.
Yeah, I mean, this is where I'm fighting with myself, because my data to Darren in free practice 2, it's literally I'm dropping 1/10 a corner. And when you're dropping 1/10 a corner over 9 corners, you're 9/10 behind. And them boys are clearly on the pace, and Darren's told me how good they are all year. So until I magically get good at taking away 1/10 from Darren Turner on a corner, I ain't going to be there. Yeah.
My producer's saying, but to be fair, Darren is a bit more experienced, and that is very, very true. Has Darren had any words with you, or does he crack on now and then you speak afterwards?
No, he cracks on now, and we'll just see what happens. He knows that it's way around here. He knows what he's doing.
What, realistically, can Darren do to make up that gap?
I don't think there is. I honestly think that them boys up there are doing such a good job this year, and Darren praises them all the time that they're doing such a good job, that I just don't think... Last year we had an advantage of Darren being able to jump silvers and make the gap over, and then we'd be near the front. It's just not happening this season. Maybe it's the extra 25 kg we've got, but that is what it is. We deal with it and we move on and just see what we can do for the last 2 races.
Thanks, Matt. Cheers for talking to us.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly wasn't a bad effort from Matt Topham in that session. Only 9/10 slower than the fastest time. And like he says, he's in a different class. He's an AM driver. They were silver drivers. In theory, Darren Turner now might just be able to find some, if not all of that time, as and when he does get going properly. He's already 3rd fastest within this particular session, and that has moved them up into 6th place on combined times. So hearing from race control that the plan is to go green with the resumption of the session in about 3 minutes' time. So they're obviously feeling confident this won't take much longer. And I tend to agree with them, because they've got the BMW attached to the low loader. And it's now just a case of getting that completely secured and in position, and they will get it out of the way. It's always rather nerve-wracking for the teams to watch this going on, making sure that no more damage is done to the car as it's being recovered, which can happen. But the marshals here in the UK, the best in the business, and they know how to get cars recovered without further adding to the repair bill for the teams. So excellent job there. The barrier doesn't appear to have had any damage done to it. I wonder whether, as it comes back, we might get a view of the right-hand side, because it's pointing now backwards up the track, if you like, as it's on the truck, which means that we should see it from the outside edge of the track, and that will tell us, and it will tell the teams, or the team, I should say, just how much damage needs doing. Of course, the team will immediately jump on the car when it gets back to the pit lane, but we might get our first look at it now. It doesn't look too bad, does it? It's definitely had a whack on the right rear corner, so I suspect right rear suspension is broken, but that could have been a lot worse. There's certainly not that much bodywork damage, so a light graze with the barriers, and you can see the witness marks across the track. You can see quite clearly what he's done. Run wide onto the grass, looped it, and headed across into the barriers, and Chris Salkel now gets a ride with the recovery crews, and he'll have a little chat about, I don't know, the weather, what he's going to have for dinner. And how bad his damage is on his car. And you can see there, it is the right rear corner that's taken the hit. Yes, left front as well. So he's gone in pretty much on both of the right-hand side corners. So a little bit of work to be done for Harriet's Chariot, the car sponsored by famous TV chef Ainsley Harriet, who does come along to a lot of the races. We actually spoke to him at Alton Park at the start of the year, and has a real passion for motorsport, and has become good friends with Chris, and continuing to lend his support to the team, and he will be hoping that they get that car back out there again for tomorrow and back up towards the front of the field where we know it belongs. The sister car, the number 90 car, is going to be the first one to queue up. Will Burns now, reigning champion in GT4, will be at the front of the queue to get the session resumed, and that will happen hopefully within the next 30 seconds or so, because we've got the recovery vehicle into the pit lane now. The track, as far as we're aware, is clear, and with just under 6 minutes to go, there's plenty of time for the teams to get their cars out there and set good lap times. In fact, it's not the BMW at the front of the queue, because the Paddock Motorsport car of Adam Hatfield actually beat everyone to the front, but they're not allowed on track until the session is officially restarted by race director Peter Daly up in race control, who himself was out racing a GT4 Porsche actually at the Silverstone Classic, got himself a class podium a couple of weeks ago, so congratulations to Peter, who's a very handy racing driver in Formula Fords, and as it turns out, GT machinery as well. Right now he's doing the job he does best, which is orchestrating the resumption of this qualifying session, our final part of qualifying. Hopefully that was our final delay to qualifying this afternoon, and the cars head out onto the Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit once again. And now there is a real hurry to get out there, because unlike at the first start of the session when we had a few teams choosing to lay back and try and get some clean air and not go out with everybody else, now they know they don't have the time for that. We're only going to have half the session to go essentially, and still almost half the field haven't set a lap time in this session. Number 10, Ginetta, making its way through there. Charlie Robertson at the wheel, and good to see Charlie back in the British GT Championship as well. The number 10 car that he shares with Darren Leon, who's making his British GT debut. He's been racing in the Ginetta GT Academy, which is also on the support bill here at Brands Hatch. And Darren is looking, I believe, to make a move into GT3 even in the near future. He's some real ambitions as Darren. He's got a good co-driver to learn from here this weekend. Right, on board with Matt Cowley, this is the Academy Motorsport Ford Mustang. Cowley did set a time just before the red flag came out, but it wasn't a particularly quick one. I'm pretty sure he can go faster than that. So another ex-Formula Ford 1600 ace, Matt Cowley, went over to race in America for a couple of years. Kind of fitting then that as he comes back into British GT, he is at the wheel of the most American of American muscle cars, in my opinion, the Ford Mustang GT4, which had success a couple of years ago, of course, under the Multimatic Motorsport banner. Academy Motorsport these days running the only Mustang on the grid, having predominantly been associated with Aston Martins in the years prior to getting their hands on the Ford. It's really starting to look a little bit more dodgy now weather-wise, isn't it? The light as the cars come across the line has rain in the air, so extra urgency then for the teams to get on with this, and it's Darren Turner who is leading around Joe Wheeler in the SRO Motorsport Ginetta, and Joe Wheeler yet to set a time, so let's see what his sector times are like. Big wiggle, big slide out over the curbs. That wasn't ideal coming out of Druids. The pressure is on here, and the temptation is to overdrive on this first lap of the session, but that's not the way to go here. You've got to be patient. If the weather does change, that's sort of out of the driver's hands anyway. If you are worried about conditions changing though, then the first lap has to be good. Get a banker lap in, and then if you have time for more laps, then that's a bonus. Darren Turner there plunging downhill. Robertson in the other Ginetta, purple first sector. Charlie Robertson in the other Assetto car, the other G56 Ginetta, faster than anybody in sector 1. Now that car was not particularly rapid in the first session, so it's doubtful that Charlie's going to be able to challenge for pole, but could well set the individual fastest time in this session. Joe Wheeler sliding his way there through Sheen Kerr. That was very, very spectacular. His middle sector has just been completed. It is, of course, a personal best because he's not done a lap time yet, but let's see what the overall lap time is going to be at the end. Through clearways he comes then. Watch for the timing tower to start changing very rapidly here, because we're getting quite a few drivers going quicker than they have done previously. Adam Hatfield gets the Paddock Motorsport McLaren up the order slightly. What can Joe Wheeler do? He goes 6th on combined times. I suspect there's a bit more pace in the car than that. Charlie Robertson comes through though, and well, the lap time sort of died a bit there at the end, didn't it? Only 10th fastest on combined times for Charlie, 7th within the individual session. What can Matt Cowley do? He comes through and does jump into 5th on the grid. So Matt Cowley moves the Ford Mustang up a little bit. Seb Hopkins, you saw coming through there in the Porsche. He's just set a fastest final sector of anybody else, but stays 4th on combined times. Benji Hetherington in the other Porsche jumps back inside the top 10. And we ride on board with Senan Fielding then, who currently is fastest in this session, but needs to find an extra 71 thousandths of a second to challenge for pole position. And he has gone purple in Sector 1, but is then immediately beaten by Charlie Robertson. That doesn't really matter though. Robertson's not really a factor for pole, so Fielding then at the moment could be about to jump right onto the front of the grid. The Audi heads towards Westfield Corner, pitches in over the curbs, beautifully balanced over the top of the hill, little bit of a bobble as he just catches the curb wrong, but keeps it nicely together. The middle sector, remember, ends on the exit of this corner. That's the next chance we'll get to compare his sector times to everybody else's. There's the line, and the time is not an improvement, but it is not that far away from the fastest that anyone's done, so this could be enough for pole. Down towards clearways he comes, needs to find less than a 10th of a second to take pole position away from our racing, one of their championship rivals, remember, so there's extra importance to this. Across the line he is about to come then. Senan Fielding at the moment would line up 3rd on the grid, but after that lap he goes to pole position by just over a 10th of a second. Senan Fielding has done it, but can anybody else beat him? That's the next question. We are getting personal best lap times from the likes of Charlie Robertson, for example. Robertson's just got 2nd fastest within this session, but that's only good enough for 10th on combined times. What is Josh Miller doing? That's the real question. Miller, personal best in Sector 1, not an improvement in Sector 2. He brings the R Racing Aston Martin through clearways. He now needs to find just over a 10th of a second, and he's not going to do it because he's on the grass. He's almost in the gravel. That will ruin that lap, and it will spoil the start of his next lap as well. So Josh Miller, I'm afraid, might just have cost himself a shot at pole position there. That tiny little error, lucky not to get dragged right out into the gravel actually, but it probably now has cost him a shot at improving on his next lap. There goes Matt Cowley in the Ford Mustang through Surtees Corner. Cowley has gone 5th now on combined times. So the grid at the moment then would be the Stella Audi ahead of the R Racing Aston Martin, the Toyota 3rd, then it's the Seb Hopkins Porsche 4th, Cowley's Mustang is 5th, and Joe Wheeler has got the Assetto Ginetta into 6th place. The other Assetto Ginetta, Charlie Robertson, he is going to be very, very rapid in the second half of tomorrow's race because he's gone purple again in Sector 1. He's clearly one of the fastest of the drivers in the pro element, if you like, of GT4. Comfortably outpacing Darren Turner at the moment in this qualifying session. And here comes the number 10 Ginetta. Oh, he's got traffic ahead. Let's hope it gets out of the way because this could be a really good individual lap time. It is unlikely to move him that much further up the grid, but Charlie Robertson staking his claim to be the fastest GT4 driver here this weekend at Brands Hatch. He comes across the line, and it is, in the end, not an improvement. Perhaps that traffic just distracting him slightly at the end. That was a very aggressive run to the line for Bobby Trundley, who comes across 12th, so slowest of the drivers to set a time, unfortunately, in that session. We are waiting still for Seb Hopkins to come through, but he's not improving in the sectors, nor is Josh Miller, interestingly. So Miller a little bit off the pace compared to his teammate Jamie Day, isn't he? Josh Miller only 7th fastest within the second part of qualifying. They'll still start on the front row. There he goes, look across the line. And as I suspected, the first sector of that lap wasn't particularly good because of the moment that he had at the end of the preceding lap. So that sadly counts that Aston Martin out of the pole position fight. So it is going to be the Stella Motorsport Audi. Senan Fielding has just set the fastest time in session 2 for GT4, and his teammate Richard Williams is down in the pit lane celebrating with Bryn.
Not great for you at Spa, really, with the penalty you got, but you start in pretty good fettle, should we say, tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to come out of the summer break with a bit of a bounce, which I think we've got here. So, you know, I mean, what Senan, like, if anyone can, Senan can, like, to pull a lap out like that, to find the little bit that we needed to get on to pole was just amazing. So yeah, hats off to him really. I just did my bit, which was all right, but nothing like what he's able to do around here. So yeah, really happy.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Cheers.
So Richard Williams and Senan Fielding getting back on form again, it has to be said. They weren't off form at Spa, but as Bryn said a penalty that unfortunately knocked them down the order slightly, and they do end up on pole position then for the penultimate round of the Intelligent Money British GT Championship within GT4 anyway. Audi from Aston Martin with Josh Miller and Jamie Day qualifying second, then the Toyota of Collard and Edgar with the Porsche of Hopkins and Orton rounding out the second row of the GT4 grid, then the Ford Mustang of Matt Cowley and Marco Signoretti, Joe Weider and Freddie Tomlinson, impressive pace from the Ginetta, they're 6th on the grid tomorrow. Then comes the first Pro-Am entry, but it is the overall GT4 Championship leader, so much as we saw in GT3, the Championship leading car out-qualified by pretty much all of its Championship rivals. 7th on the grid then for Newbridge, just ahead of the Will Burns and Jack Brown BMW, then Adam Hatfield and Mo Ritson's Paddock McLaren is 9th, ahead of Benji Hetherington and Mark Radcliffe to round out the top 10. Then it's Charlie Robinson and Darren Leon's SRO Motorsports Ginetta, the second Ginetta, 11th on the grid, ahead of Trundley and Morgan for Team Brit. And of course, the Century Motorsport number 9 car after that off for Chris Salkeld will have to start from the back at the GT4 grid. Well, one of the more eventful qualifying sessions we've had for a while, I would say, in the British GT Championship, and it all bodes well, doesn't it, for a very exciting 2 hours of racing tomorrow, with the penultimate round of the championship taking place around the Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit. The chance of mixed weather conditions, championships on the line. You will not want to miss it. Well, it all started in blazing sunshine just over an hour ago as the cars rolled out on the track. It wasn't long, though, before we had the first car in the barriers, Andre Borodin in the new Greystone GT McLaren, unfortunately bringing about a red flag. The first part of the session saw the 2Cs Motorsport Mercedes really looking strong, and they are going to be starting from a particularly strong position tomorrow. There was a very close moment, though, for Marcus Clutton and Callum Mcleod. Marcus was not best pleased with getting delayed by the championship-leading Mercedes AMG. In GT4, it was all about Stella Motorsport. A brilliant lap by Senan Fielding puts the Audi on pole position for the penultimate round of the Intelligent Money British GT Championship here at Brands Hatch.